Before we dive into today's incredible episode, let's take a moment together. There is nothing better than settling in, maybe with a cup of tea, just like in our African tradition, to soak in stories that inspire and empower. So grab your favorite drink and fasten your seatbelts and get ready for an unforgettable conversation with our guest today. And here's the thing. Here at Raw, we cannot do this without you. By clicking subscribe, not only are you joining a community, not only are you subscribing to a channel, but you are becoming a key part of a movement that's reshaping the global narrative about African excellence. We are on a mission to inspire 100,000 passionate individuals that believe in the power of African innovation, culture, and leadership. And guess what? You can help us get there by spending only 2 seconds of your time. 1. Subscribe. 2. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. And if you want to take it a step further, visit our website and consider partnering with us. Your support fuels our journey and empowers the next generation of leaders. Together, we are changing the world. Let's roar. Okay, she's a mom, a psychedelic guide, as well as a passionate advocate for therapeutic African medicine to combat depression. Akua Ofosuhene is also a respected speaker, having shared her knowledge at places like Oxford University, UCL, Drug Science and Breaking Convention, UK's largest psychedelic conference. Welcome to the sunny place, Akua.
Thank you so much. I'm so pleased
I'm
to
so
be
excited
here.
to have you here today as well. Let's start from the beginning. You were born in the UK and have Ghanaian heritage. What does your name mean, Akua
Yes.
Ofosuhene? Normally in African culture, our names have meanings to them or a story behind them.
Yeah. So Akua means a girl born on Wednesday. And so the male would be Kweku, which people may have heard of Kwekwanansi, the spider, sometimes also called like a trickster god. And another animal associated with my name is the goat. And I think there's some other animals associated with Akuya or Kweku. But we are named after our deity of Wednesday or our god of Wednesday, which is the god Aku. So that's the meaning of my name.
And Ofosuhene, does it have a story to it or a meaning to it?
So my father's surname was Fosu, and my mother's surname was Ofosuhene. But my dad, I don't know why my dad took my mum's surname actually. And then later he actually reverted back to his surname, Fosu. So the earlier children are Ofosuhene and the later children are Fosu, but still the same two parents. I don't know what that story was.
That's a first. I love it. And why did your parents leave Ghana to move to the UK?
I think in the 60s, in the 50s and 60s, there was a real drive, especially after Kwame Nkrumah came into power. Young people felt very, very galvanized. They were going to go away, become educated and come back and, build the new Ghana. My dad was a real follower of Nkrumah, so that's why we have our Ghanaian names. Most people my age will have a Christian name, an English name, but my parents felt very, very strongly kind of, go African. And so that's why they came to the UK. They had a 10-year plan and they stayed from 1966 to 1969 to 79. And we went back to Ghana. But then unfortunately, Jerry John Rawlins, JJ Rawlins, did his, and that's what sent us back to the UK. And then from then, it was just a constant for my parents backwards and forwards. But I think once you had the rise of Margaret Thatcher in the UK, which brought in a huge recession, over 3 million people unemployed, everybody's jobs got affected. And in Ghana, we also had a period of time after Rawlings took over of not very much for quite a long time. So their plans to move back to Ghana really got spoiled after then. And I didn't manage to come back to Ghana again myself until the late 90s. And I came back to Ghana myself when I was about 24, 25. And then ever since then, I've been backwards and forwards, backwards and
I wanted to ask, did your parents speak Tree to you at home as you were growing up?
Yes, yes, they spoke tree, and I was lucky enough in 1979 when we did move back to. 1976 we moved back to Ghana, and so I learnt even more tree. But my mum always used to say that she had to teach me tree because I was such a nosy, talkative child that I would embarrass her in public. So she really very quickly taught me tree so that she could just tell me, there's a man getting on the bus, he only has one leg, do not say anything. And yeah, and things like that, because she said I was always saying these type of embarrassing things. So I was lucky. And so I did the same thing with my son. I also made sure that from when he was a baby, we spoke tree around him and he would be able to
I feel
speak
like
tree.
African moms will let you know what's up real quick. And as a
It's
young
very
girl,
true.
what sparked your interest to learn how to sew?
Well, I think with our family, because my mum was
Mm.
a dressmaker, all of us, all her children know how to sew. And I think it was a way to, I suppose, bond with her more. It was something you saw happening in the house every day. Um, so for me, I don't even remember learning how to sew. It's just I remember getting older and asking more questions, but I was always sewing. And I think now there's only one of us left who sews a lot. That's my little brother. So we all pick it up and leave it, pick it up and leave it. It's one of those things. It's like you can do it.
And at this young age as well, did you have any early experiences with spirituality or plant medicine, or was it something you discovered later?
So when I was younger, I think I was very spiritually inquisitive. But my mum's sister was a Christian healer of note, and so she really carried the whole family into Christianity, because before then, their was what we call Dunsini, which is, I suppose, a
Mm.
spiritual herbalist. And he would have his deities that he worked with. Four of his brothers were Okomfo. So those are the kinds of people who actually are taken over by a spirit and go into trance. So our family were very, very spiritual, traditional African religion. We can trace them going back at least
Mm.
500 years of always there being a Okomfo in the family. But after my grandfather died, my aunt received the gift of healing, um, but there was no one to guide her. And when they would take her to the traditional healers and priests, no one could tell what deity
Mm.
was on her head or riding her. And it was only when a Christian missionary came to our village, a woman called Hannah, she was the one who was able to recognize that what my aunt was saying was passages from the Bible. So when my aunt took her healing gifts into Christianity, she was very prolific healer and healed lots of notable people. So the whole family followed her into Christianity. They threw away all the old deities. They marked an end between our family and traditional African. So for at least, I would say 70 years, the family has been predominantly Christian. So when I was growing up and I was interested in the world, I was really just shown that there was only the Christian. When I would ask my aunt questions like, where does God come from? And she would say, if you think of such things, you'll go. So, it was, you know, it how it was portrayed to us, but and I accepted it really until maybe I was about 14, and then I moved into Buddhism. That made a lot more sense to me. So I was a Buddhist for nearly 10 years, and then I really just had to accept that even Buddhism was something I was doing just because I didn't want to say I didn't believe. I think it was just kind of, you can't say that. You must. And so after a while, I realized, no, I'm getting interested in something that feels far more who I far more who we all are. And it's not these big title Christianity, Buddhism. Everything in Buddhism makes sense, but I felt there was something else closer to me. And it was only really, I think, as I unpacked the things I liked from Buddhism and the things that I liked from nature, that I started to realize that actually for me, what is intrinsic to me, to my heart, is something more along the lines of what our ancestors
Interesting.
believed in nature and stuff. And for my Christian family, I always just say to them that they're cleverer than me. I'm just not clever enough to understand the nature of the creator of everything. And I mean it really sincerely. I can't even, there's flowers here. I can't even fathom a flower, let alone to say I have a personal relationship with the creator of everything. I mean, for me it would be, I would be lying, and it would be such a height of arrogance that so I'm very happy for people who can really feel it, because I believe them that they really feel it. But for me, I just know I'm not there yet. I'm only a little human.
Oh, just off the question, I do wonder now that you're saying this, how come in Africa we abandoned our African spirituality and maybe seen more so as evil or something? I mean, like you, I barely had anything else uh, about that. Probably it's the first time I'm actually going to get a bit of enlightenment, a bit more and talk about African spirituality. And I'm African, I'm Ugandan. So why haven't we heard about this? Why have we abandoned it?
I think people
Mm,
didn't abandon it, but I think it became a way to survive. I totally can understand, just using the context of our Asante history. My grandfather was, I told you he was a healer, he was a Dunsini. He helped the Asante king who was exiled by the British to the Seychelles, and that was 1894, 90. My grandfather was one of the healers working very close with the king at that time. He was also very active in the Yasantua War, which was 1899 to, I think, 1900. And we lost. It's like, okay, they didn't get to take the golden stool, but we lost the war in terms of Asante became part of
mm,
Gold Coast. And so then we had the oppressors' religion, but also education and also
mm,
money. And I think sometimes when we talk about these things, we don't consider what that means. That when my grandfather first started being part of the people who fought these people, we had our own currency, we had our own education, we had our own belief system. By the time of the end of the last war, the Yasantua War, by the time of 19, those things had started to change. Now, by the time he married my grandmother. He was already an old man. She was a young woman. So she had 10 children. And when the third one wanted to go to school, my grandfather says, no, I won't. If you want to send this child to school, because we are matrilineal, so the children belong to the woman. So he said to my grandmother, if you want to send your children to school, I can't stop you, but me, I won't for that. And I really understood him, because you are wanting his children to be taught by the people who are
That was
oppressing.
his concern.
So yeah, and the thing is, I also understand my grandmother. She was much, much younger than him. She didn't grow up during these two wars. She grew up where if you were not working in some ways for the colonial government, you didn't have this currency that isn't yours. This currency is imposed. So for my grandmother, no, her children have to go to school, get jobs working in the administration, become lawyers, become teachers. Everything is
Education.
under this administration. Exactly. And by the time people like, let's say my aunt then became a Christian healer, by then it's 50 years after we have been colonized, the Asante people have been colonized. Nobody remembers life before colonization. They're all, what people know is, hey, this person went to school, he went to the city, now he comes back in a car. I too want my children to go to school, go to city, come back in a car. So this is how gradually we became separated from our spirituality. It was a fact of economics and being able to get in the world. But there are interesting, what I can see is there are interesting cycles, because for our family, it's been 70 years in Christianity. And then now, slowly, some of us are coming out of that, you know, and so it only took 70 years. 70 years seems like a really long time, but then I can say, that means in another 70 years, I wonder how many of our family will be in the Christian. And I think the growth of the internet is doing this across the whole world, not just the Black world, but the whole world. People are finding kinship amongst other people and discovering, hang on, let me look back beyond school. Let me look back beyond what our received wisdoms are. So it's not a surprise that we lost so much, but what I can see spiritually, nothing was, it's
It's all
all coming
coming.
back again, and more so.
And I honestly, that's why I felt I had to have this conversation with you, and I wanted to have you here on the Raw, because the knowledge that you hold, I feel, will be enlightening. I think it's very important to collect knowledge when people need to find it. And so I am hoping that people can be able to get a bit of enlightenment about African spirituality and plant medicine. Um, Okay, and then fast forward to your adulthood, you're married and raising a child in the UK, and then you decide to move to Ghana. What inspired that move?
It was very strange. It was, I always, so when we left Ghana in 1979, I was 9 years old. I didn't want to leave, but we left because there was a coup, and suddenly everybody is queuing up for bread, and market women are being beaten up by soldiers in the streets, students are being arrested. So I totally understood why my parents took us all away back to the UK. But I know, like, by the time I was 13, 14, I wanted to go back to Ghana. I wanted to go to secondary school. I wanted to go to boarding school. I wanted all these experiences I'd heard, and they didn't really have the means anymore. And also, I think they had lost confidence in Project. By then, I think, yeah, Rawlings was still in power, and people were saying Ghana is getting better. But I think for my parents, it was a very scary thing. Do you go back to this place and maybe then there can be another coup. And, you know, there were so many
Mm.
coups around Africa at the time, Nigeria, everywhere. So they decided to stay. But I always, always, always wanted to go back. And I especially, once I went as 24, 25, I just said to myself, if I have a, they will come. And so once I knew as well that I was having a boy, it was I know we're going back to Ghana. I just saw the class that I belonged to in the UK and what I could have. I just knew I could give my son a better life and a better chance of life in Ghana growing up, educationally, socially, psychologically. That's what
Uh, um, After making this decision, then unfortunately you lost your husband. And how did that? Mm,
we weren't we weren't married, but he
oh,
was my
okay.
son's. Yeah.
And even then you persisted, or should I say you persevered and moved to Ghana despite the loss of the father of your child.
Yeah. I mean, it was a very, very
Mm,
big loss for us because
mm,
they were very close. And even though we weren't together, we were real co-parents. And so even just before he died, we were moving to and then we were still discussing whether how we were going to do Christmas and the New Year, who would go where. You know, these were all the discussions. Whether or not there was even one time we were saying, okay, my son would go and stay with him in Abu Dhabi, and then the two of them would come to Ghana for New Year. You know, it was all
family
these
plan.
discussions because he died. Yeah, yeah, he died in the November, but when he died, all our stuff had already been
Mm,
shipped to. So it was crazy. We were going to be flying to Ghana on the Sunday, and he died on the
mm,
Saturday in Abu. So it was just crazy, and we ended up having to stay in the UK for another 3 months. But it was a very difficult time because I'd rented out our flat in the UK, so somebody was waiting to move in, so she had to move in. Me and my son had to move in with my best friend who was coming out to be with us for a little bit went to Ghana by herself to set up the house because everything had already been shipped. So it was just this crazy time of, well, what are we going to do? And it's like, well, we still have to go. We can't actually not go because someone has paid me rent for where we
mm,
used to live. I don't have the money to give back to her. I've paid rent for somewhere. You know, it was just crazy. So we just carried on and moved to Ghana. So it was very difficult in one way because this constant, you know, suddenly then there was not going to be any more money coming from his.
mm,
There was going to be no more contact. The routines that we had, that every Tuesday phone call, you know, it was, and as a parent, to have had another parent who was
mm,
so involved, it was really hard not having someone you can say the boring things to. You know, as a parent, there's things you tell your siblings. Of course, you all talk about your children, but you try and keep it interesting. But at least to your child's other parent, you can tell them the
right.
really boring things that your child has done. And I think in many ways that then transferred over to my mum,
Mm,
then me and my mum would have those conversations because as a grandmother, she did not find the everyday
mm.
so boring. But yeah,
It
it was a
such bad
strange.
timing.
It was good to be in Ghana, but it was a strange, yeah,
Mm,
lonely time as well, to be trying to deal with
mm.
that situation.
What was it like raising your son in Ghana?
I personally, I really, really, really liked it. I really liked it. He became very independent. He was able to go to school by himself. He became much more confident at school. He started doing well at school. And he was able to even influence other children in his class because he was always such a big. And I remember his headmaster telling me how all these other kids are now coming to school with their books. So now it's not just him who's sitting at the edge of the playground reading. There are other, yeah, the other quiet kids are also bringing their books to school. So I was very hopeful, really, about the
Mm.
future with him. And there was an amazing woman called Madame Bridget, who she was in charge of an arts and crafts organization in Ghana. And she really, really liked my son. And I was telling her there was this very expensive school that I would like him to go to. And she always said, you know, whatever happens, in any way I can help and support you, I'll write to them to try and get him a scholarship, all of these things. So Ghana, for me as a parent, really felt like, okay, we're going to be able to thrive because I can afford things here that I just can't afford for him in the UK. Horse riding lessons, going off doing taekwondo, private tutors coming to the house. So it felt like, yes, give
Mm.
him what he needs as a growing
That's what
child.
every mother wants for their kid. I know my mom told me a lot of similar stuff. Like, why if she's given you everything, then that's everything she needs in this world. You touched a bit on the differences between raising a child in Ghana and UK. Just wondering, are there any other more differences between raising a child in Ghana and UK?
I think for me as a parent, what I really liked about raising him in Ghana was that because the culture has a certain expectation about children and families, it was kind of easier because even when he's going to school, I know there are lots of people whose eyes are on him. You know, it felt very safe. There was even one day where he was really, and I thought, let me go down to the bus to just see if there's an accident on the road or something. And I remember I walked past this orange seller, and she, as soon as she saw me, hey, Ma, you're going to look for Seren. Yeah, me too. I was wondering, he should have
Oh,
passed
yeah.
by now. I'm like, I'm like, yeah, I know. And then I got down to near the bus station. There's these guys who repair cars. They said almost the same thing. Hey, Ma, you're going to look for him. Ah, he's late. This boy. If he's just been playing at school, tell him we'll, you know, it's, and that's what it was like. And even when I got to the bus station and I asked, they were like, actually, some buses have been late. So the station master phoned one of the buses, and the guy was able to say, oh, I saw the kids. They're waiting for buses, but the little ones aren't getting on because there's so many people at the bus station. So don't worry, they
Exactly.
will get buses. You know, it's, there is
Mm,
informal, but in a way formal
mm,
because it's cultural accountability that really
mm.
helps you. And so I always felt confident that if anybody tried to do something to my son in our local area, there's enough people who know this
Exactly.
child belongs there. That, yeah, they will help you. And if my son did something that he shouldn't do, anybody will tell,
Exactly. Yeah.
you know, and come and tell me. Yeah. So socially, that for me, that was the thing that I loved about Ghana and that I definitely really missed when we had to come back to the UK for sure, for
And
sure.
it's very interesting saying that because it's exactly the same in Uganda as well. We always talk about this street where you had to go from our home to like a shop, and everyone knew whose child everyone was. Everyone knew that kid comes from this house, and we always joke that even the drunkard, that person belonged to us, and we knew who's his parents were, and he would see him come in the morning. It's like, yeah, well, that's Sula. Well, he's back now. He's like dragging on home. It's like everyone knows who everyone is there, and that goes a long way.
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
then at some point, you and your son returned to the UK, and what was that transition like for you?
That was a very hard transition because originally we were just coming back for a few months to help look after my mum. She was having an operation, quite a serious operation. And so we came back, and then unfortunately the operation went wrong. and my mum was left with an injury to her back. So suddenly she needed care. And sometimes I think, "Ah, I should have still just gone back." But at the time, it didn't really feel like there was the option because she really did need care and help. Um, and we were the ones who were here. So we ended up staying. But it was very, very difficult. It was never my plan. I never wanted my son to go to secondary school in the UK. That was like one of my biggest things. And so I was so happy that we had been able to leave when he was 8. And now to be back in the UK and he's 13, it was like, ah, this was the thing I never wanted to have. But so, I mean, we found a school that we thought was going to be amazing because it was related to
Mm.
UCL, and it was the academy secondary school version of university college. And I thought, oh, maybe this will be a really easy way for him to actually get into the university because he's going into the secondary school. And one of the governors was an expert in the teenage brain, and I watched her talking, doing TED Talks, and I thought, okay, maybe I was worrying for nothing. If this woman is involved, I'm sure this,
Very
they're going to
good.
really look after the children, blah, blah, blah. And it wasn't like that at all. It wasn't like that at all, unfortunately.
How did you realize that your son is is involved in a drug dealing?
Yeah. So we were just one day, one summer at home. There was a knock on the door, and it was the police. And they told us that he'd been arrested with another boy. And I think he was carrying the money, and the other boy was carrying the drugs that was thrown away, which they found
Mm.
because they saw them. And that was literally the first occasion. And it was, I'd realized there was something I
Mm.
wasn't happy. And even one, somebody else's son had kind of said that they weren't happy about the people my son was now hanging out with. And I remember confronting my son, and my son just saying that this other boy was just too young to be hanging out with him. But I was very disturbed, but it was only after the arrest that I
It's more
realized, oh my,
serious than you thought.
okay,
Mm.
there's something seriously wrong, and it made sense his failing marks at school, even though he had a tutor at home. Everything then made sense why he was no longer performing the way he was
Mm.
just a year.
And as a mother, dealing with a son who is hanging out in a gang or dealing with drugs, that must have been really stressful. How did it affect you?
It was
Mm.
really stressful. Yeah, it was really stressful, and I definitely became I was, but I think I was a bit depressed. If I'm honest, if I really look, I think once I became like a carer for my
Mm.
mum, I think I definitely became a bit depressed because I had to the whole story of my life work. And it was really interesting because I remember when I started looking for psychedelics, it's very interesting. There's almost like a crossover where I remember my little sister said to me one day, like, what is it you're looking for? You're doing all this research, and it's like, what is it you're looking for? What is it that you think is your problem? And I really thought about it, and I said to her, I feel like a computer that's just not working at its best anymore. I need to be defragged. I need all the running software needs
Mm.
updating. That's how I feel. I feel like I am not fully aligned with where my life is now. That's the kind of help I need. And and I can't remember when this conversation happened, but I know I'd been feeling not being happy in my life and not being in control in my life
Mm.
for a while. And I think that's probably why a lot of things to do with my son. I really didn't see the change properly. I think I just thought, well, he's becoming a teenager and teenagers are this and teenagers are that. But it was only really after the arrest that I had to like, "Woof, okay, this is what is going on and you have to sort it out. You have to sort yourself out and you have to sort this child out." That was definitely a wake up call, but it was still very, very depressing for a long time because even trying to work out what is the right took time to even get to.
So you got into Mama Bear more with that intervention or visit from the
Yeah,
police.
I think I think it was from then it was like, okay, find him a therapist, find me a therapist. But soon started to realize that therapy is great, but it's too slow. That's really when I started me researching other things, was I saw that the slow of therapy was not keeping up with what was happening in our family, in that he'd gone from staying out just a little bit to now staying out till really late, to not coming home to 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, not listening to anything anybody said, finding strange phones in the house, seeing a strange car bringing him home, noticing strange people call him and he has to leave. These things were happening faster and faster and faster, and the therapy was like, so I started exploring, okay, what works fast? And it's really that search that led me to things like tapping, emotional freedom technique, EFT. Then I learned nonviolent communication because our communication was so getting more and more distant, ending up in shouting, just realizing there's something in control going on when anyone is trying to speak to him. And I realized that the problem also wasn't just him, because I wasn't able to keep my temper, and I could see how he was getting very good at pressing my buttons, because then if there's a big row, then he can just leave. So I realized I need help to not let things escalate into a big fighting match. So nonviolent communication was a brilliant thing to learn. I learned Byron Katie's The Work, which is a system of self inquiry where you can take a question about something you believe and you can get to understand the truth of it, whether it's just coming from your pain, your fears. So as I'm learning all these things, they're helping a little bit, they're making a difference, but he's still going down the road he's going down. And it's really then that somebody actually said, you're really spiritual and you don't have an altar to your ancestors, and you're with this situation. And once she said, I thought, hey, do you know what? She's right. This is, I know my mum is Christian, she's praying. My big sister is Christian in Ghana. I know she's praying. And me, I'm doing all of this other stuff, kind of thinking of a spiritual aspect. And that was a real point for me to then, and I knew somebody who was very spiritual, Baba Siete. He lives in South Africa, but he's an American hoodoo and voodoo priest. And so I got in touch with him, and he was really big help. And I got in touch with a guy called Dalian, who runs an organization called Ancestral Voices. And he was the one I asked about how to make an ancestral altar. And he gave me a lot of advice. So before then, I had never had an ancestral altar. And he also told me a lot of good things that had happened once he had an altar for his mother who had passed. So I think for me, once I had the altar, I created the altar, and then I was getting advice and help from Baba Siete in South Africa, and then he's telling me what herbs to buy, what oils to buy, pouring libation at the crossroads for a legba. It really galvanized me, as well as with all the psychological stuff that I'm learning. and I found a wonderful book by Gabor Mate and Gordon Neufeld called Hold On to Your Kids, which tells you about peer,
Mm.
and it explains how we our kids are becoming unattached from us because they're in school most of the hours, and then they're becoming attached to their peers. And I could see that's
Mm.
what had happened to my son. And so just learning all these different things were giving me more to really parent the child I now had. But I think the final thing for me was the discovery of
Mm.
psychedelics, something that could change my mind fast and could empower me to become the parent I needed to be fast. It was the psychedelics that was like the game changer that brought everything else together. Yeah.
And in fact, at this time, you even had a cancer scare, I believe, because of the stress.
Yeah, totally. When and a friend of mine is a psychotherapist, and he always it's so interesting that as a mother who was worried, the pain was then really in my breasts, and it was just this biting pain, and then lumps would come, but then they
That's scary.
like it was yeah, very 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 um but it was around that time was also when I discovered about doing that. And that whole time, so much power seemed to come in terms of the right people, then also started to come along, and I'd be searching for things online, and then, the synchronicities started.
Happiness.
So it would always make me feel like, yes, we're on the right road, we're on the right road, we're on the right road. But it was equally, the other side was equally as challenging because he was becoming
Mm.
more and more
Mm.
entrenched in what he was
I
doing.
saw an interview where you were talking about setting up the altar, and apparently the prayers were so effective because you're praying for your son to not get colds and for protection, and it was so effective that he himself was shaking his head one time. I was like, your prayers are really working. You might be, and he even used the word witch.
Yeah,
I thought that was
totally,
funny.
totally. Yeah, that was Yeah, he was, because my prayers was I want him home. I don't want him to be found with any drugs. I don't want him to be charged with having any money that shows that he was dealing in drugs. And he was arrested 5 times in a row, and each time would be after there was no drugs or no money. And so th- that was what really scared him. But it was so interesting that these things are really scaring you, and you're still not
Mm.
stopping, and you're still not stopping. And that's when I started to realize that as much as I'm doing these things and I'm changing and I'm influenced, he needs to do
Mm.
that work. And it was so difficult. He's now in it. But what was really helpful for me was finding a book by a woman called Diane Benscoter. And I think it's called something like In My Master's Footsteps. But she's Diane
I
Benscoter,
believe
and
it's called
she
Shoes of a Servant, My Unconditional Devotion to Our Life. Yeah.
that's it. Yes, yes, yeah. Brilliant book, because I found an interview with her where she was talking about how being in a is the same thing as being in a gang. And I recognized that because I'd really started to break down what was happening to my son, and it was a slavish devotion to whoever was called, and because it was happening to another two boys at the time, I was speaking to their, so we were sharing a lot of information, and we all were like saying it's crazy the way how these boys are, these people call, and it doesn't matter what you do, they have to leave the house. We'd said it's like they're in a cult. So when I Googled cults and gangs, Diane Benscoter was the one who came up. And she talked about the how similar it was. So I bought her book, and she has a whole thing in there about how you help somebody get out of a cult. And so I just followed everything that she said. No longer saying bad things about the organization, empathizing with them, sympathizing with them, keeping your thoughts about the negative thoughts you're having to yourself. So that allows them to open up. Because one of the things she says in the book that was so helpful was she said somebody in a cult thinks about leaving the cult probably every day, but then they re indoctrinate themselves to. And if you, as a family member, can stick around to be that ear that is not speaking against the cult, every now and again, they'll give you a bit of information that you can use to get further into their psyche. So that's what I started to do, was just not criticizing the gangs anymore and what he was doing and all of this stuff. And I could see that it really worked, coupled with the nonviolent communication. It really worked to bring our relationship together enough that while he would be out doing stuff, he would be confident to ring me and stay on the phone with me for hours at a time while he was doing these things. So I could see that, okay, I'm bringing him some comfort from what he's doing. And so it was during then that I was able to ask him to come home and to do some plant medicine in the hope that it would change.
Isn't that though counterintuitive? Because I read that you started to openly actually ask your son about how much he had sold that day. And that's a really bold move. Like the approaches that you have
Yeah,
to take. I mean, it's a different situation. It's not, I think, normally how you would have approached your son, but the situation needed something so bold. I found that very counterintuitive.
yeah. I mean, it's interesting because on a spiritual level, now I believe this is not the only time we've been through this story. When I look at certain things, the way certain bits of information came to me, I just feel like, yeah, I think we've lived this story before. I think how the way it feels like, oh, and then I discovered this, and then I discovered that, and then I read about this, and it feels like, and even the feeling from when I knew I was having a son, like literally, and my little sister shares the same feeling. When I was told I was having a son, my little sister was with me. We both looked at each other, and it was like life has to. It was really interesting. Like I all the fear, if you like, of he must not go to secondary school in the UK was always. And when I think about it now, especially in the last few years, I've thought about it. I think, okay, there had been in our family, and our family in the UK, and there was only one person that I knew of who had gone, and we're a big family in the UK. And yet, this fear that I had that my son must not go to secondary school was bigger than the facts in front of my eyes. None of my siblings have ever been to prison. None of my cousins have ever been to prison. None of my uncles have ever been to prison. Nobody in our family, I think now, like cousins, but the fear was kind of like, we have to be in Ghana, we have to be in Ghana. And I think now, really, I'm deeper into it. I think, yeah, I don't know if
That
this
was the
was the
moment.
first time this had actually happened. Yeah. So somehow there's been this, and who knows what the end is. I don't have a looking glass to see um, the
Mm,
end of the story between
mm.
us. All I know is, as a parent, I've just always tried to do my absolute best, and I find that the psychedelics are always they help.
Speaking of
They
psychedelics, I think you had mentioned and shared that at one point you are looking for answers. You are in mama bear mode, but you're trying to pick all the tools on how to, help your son and also learn and help, yourself and the whole situation that you're in. And you say that psychedelics was really what, you know, probably fastened that experience, if I understand well how you're sharing it. Maybe can you walk us through your past experience with the Kambo, Iboga, and Ayahuasca?
yeah. So yeah, when I was looking for some kind of psychedelics after I'd been reading and watching lots of scientists talk about the promise of psychedelics, because there's so many, they're calling this time the psychedelic renaissance. For the first time in 30, 40 years, all these different universities are doing trials into magic mushrooms and all these different and so I wanted something because I realized, yeah, my mind needs changing. And, but I didn't know anybody anymore who would have access to something. So I found Kambo, which is a frog medicine, and they burn the top layer of skin. There's no blood. It's a bit like if you walk past somebody and a cigarette just, that pain just touches you, and they put this frog venom inside, and it squeezes all the impurities and toxins in your organs. It squeezes it out into your stomach. You drink 2 liters of water and then you purge it back up again. And what they found is that it releases toxins, but also emotional toxins. So it's a really, and the first time I did it, I saw the difference. I felt so light. I got so many good answers. I had a lot of worry taken from my heart. So through using the Cambo, eventually I was able to meet somebody who served a medicine called Iboga, which is from around Cameroon and Gabon into Nigeria. Now we grow it. I think the Iboga farm now is actually in Ghana. And I went there and had a look. And I actually got to meet the mother plant that the Iboga I took. So the story just keeps going round in a circle. So, this is now maybe eight
Mm,
years ago, I suppose 8, 9 years ago. I managed to meet somebody and I prepare and I'm ready and I get to have Iboga. And I just assumed the Iboga must come from Gabon because
mm,
that's what I read. But when I had the Iboga, that was the biggest change in my life. That just cleansed me of so much pain that I'd been feeling about this situation. It took away the shame that I'd been feeling about this situation, the shame as a mother. You only have one child and this one you can't even manage. This was it was internal voice. And when I met more parents going through
mm,
this, um, it was the one thing we all share. You share the horror of being that parent, you know and it just was very good at clearing away all the stuff that was unhelpful, so I could have good ideas about what to do. And once I had the Iboga, it was also because everything opened up. I met more therapists after I had the Iboga. I went to more talks about psychedelics. I learned so much more. I was meeting so many more people who could help my son. It just opened a door of help, and it made me more interested in psychedelics because it was very expensive to have the Iboga. It wasn't something I was going to be able to repeat often. So then I found out about magic mushrooms, a lot cheaper. It grows all over this country, in the UK in the autumn time. So I was able to tap into having magic mushrooms, which were absolutely brilliant. Another classic psychedelic that really helps with depression. You can take any question to the medicines. And as I was working with the magic mushrooms, I started realizing that there was a way of keeping the healing for longer. And so I just started finding out different methods. Like, it was really important to have a list of intentions. And after a while, I realized that asking why to the medicine was a really silly question. It was much better to ask what I wanted and what I didn't want, what I wanted to happen and what I didn't want to happen. And the questions put that way were really helpful to me in understanding what the medicine was showing me. And then I found that after I took, I would have a whole list of things I knew what to do, how to change things. But then I would write it all down. And then 2 months later, I would look in the book and I realized, oh, I forgot this, I forgot this, I forgot that. So I then started writing down my learnings and sticking them on the wall so that I could see it every day. And I found that when I could see them every day, actually I got more healing as I was doing the new ways of doing things. It's almost like the medicine is still inside of you. So I was getting more healings. And I think when I started talking about this is when other people started approaching me to take the medicine and go through the same thing of writing down the learnings, making a plan. So if the medicine says, or I learn from the medicine, okay, this is what triggers me. So from now on, when this happens, I'm going to do B. Then if I can see and I start to do B, I end up in a new place in myself because I'm no longer behaving the way I used to behave. So, it was just all these things are happening at the same time. Like, I'm getting educated for myself, but I'm also working with other people and then learning also from their journeys. It's almost like I get more information and more healing from their healing. So life started to kind of change all around me as well, which also I think helped my son to also start to consider him also taking something, because he would say he could see how much I had changed over the years, until finally, when he was ready to come and take.
And this was right around COVID. And you say this time was also.
Yeah. And the time was perfect, because it was just before COVID, and we kind of made a promise to each other, because by then he would disappear for 3-4 days. But our communication was still going on, and I once I had the plan to, because before I just didn't know how to the question of him taking a psychedelic. I would toy around. Do I approach it this way? Do I approach it this way? Do I approach it that way? Until in the end, I just said it. And I just said, I think you should come home and take some psychedelics. And I think it will make you a better drug dealer, but you will stop happily if you will stop. And he to come and take the medicine. And of course, I knew if he took the medicine, he would stop, because I knew he wasn't in
Right.
his best. And the medicine helps you to be in your best. So whether you're depressed and you're taking the medicine, whether you're just always in arguments, whether you want to just change your friendships, whatever it is you want to change, the medicine is bringing you to your. So all you have to know is, I do not feel my optimum in this area of life. You take the medicine, it starts to pull you towards your optimum. So I knew with my son, He was never ever going to take the medicine to go out and be a better drug dealer, because I could see that was his optimum behavior. He was suffering from PTSD. He couldn't remember anything. The signs of stress in him, he was the only one who, everybody else could see that he was not a happy. So once he accepted to come home, I had been reading a book called Psychedelic Psychotherapy by a man called R. Coleman. Not his real name. He's a underground psychotherapist, and he just had a very good protocol for um, people suffering from PTSD. And the more I read his book, and the more I was really looking at my son's situation, I came up with a protocol which was MDMA first, to be followed a little while later with psilocybin magic mushrooms. And so that's what I had ready for him. And he took the MDMA, and before even 1 hour, he told me exactly how he'd been groomed. He told me he didn't want to do it anymore. He explained how he felt, how he couldn't get out, but he was ready to. So the next day, we returned everything to the people he'd been working for. And then that night, he had the psilocybin, and he was able to come out of that, thank goodness, after like 3 to nearly 4 years of stuck in this nightmare. But I always want people to know that depending on what the issue is, it's not necessarily a one and done. In terms of, it can be, some people have a psychedelic experience. They take it once, and and issues always feel to me like files. That file is literally taken and it's burnt, and that problem is gone, never to return. It can happen, but most people, there is homework. And now I've dealt with more people, especially people coming out of cults, people coming out of criminality. I've never had one where it's been just one time with the psychedelics, because the of losing yourself, which is what it is when you end up in a gang or you end up in a, the roots of losing yourself, they're very, people end up in cults because there is something in them that they want to escape anyway. This is my theory. Say it that way. Through the work that I've been doing, this is what I've seen, is there is something in the person that they were trying to get away from in themselves. The cult or the gang is a great place to go, because you end up somewhere where someone is going to tell you what to do, is going to control you psychologically, is going to keep you distracted from the thing you don't want to face. And that's what keeps somebody in a cult. So as often as they think about, there is also that underlying thing that they're scared. So when people are able to come out of a cult, and it's brilliant when they can find, especially psychedelics, or a really good therapist who can help. There's the stage of they come out and they're really happy, and then the next stage is they're filled with yeah, they're filled with shame, because now, shit, I'm that person who couldn't manage their life and somebody else was managing me. You know, what does this say about me as a person? So they have to be able to deal with. And as soon after the shame is then the thing that they were trying to escape. And so then they start needing something
Again.
to. Lots of people who come out of cults end up back in another cult. If not back in the same cult, they end up back in another cult. Lots of people who've been groomed into crime or drugs, they come out and they go. With my son, for a long time, he was working with psychedelics. to really, and I was always like praying that he could keep working with them regularly enough, long enough to this story, because I know it's not easy. And for the people I work with who've managed to come out of cults or managed to come out of prison and are really, really, really working on them, they are the hardest working people, because the temptation to escape from their lives is so strong. Um, and this is something, I don't know. Hopefully, there are people who write about this. It's not something that I've done really extensive research into, but this is just what I see from my work.
Um, that's very enlightening because I didn't realize that it almost sounds like when someone goes through that phase of being shamed and not facing themselves to see how they can be responsible for their own lives. It's ironic, but it's almost like taking the easier step, but it's really not good for you because you need to come face to face with yourself and take responsibility for your own life. And so it seems like it's easier to have someone else uh, take that lead in your life. So after the treatment with the psychedelics, what were the effects on you and your son?
So, as I say, with COVID coming in, it was wonderful because then there wasn't such a pull to go out anyway. Because so that helped him in his journey of actually coming away
So the
from the
treatment
group
started
and coming
during
away from,
COVID, and you were together with your son at home. Okay.
yeah, yes, yeah. So that really, really helped. And then they closed the borders with Ghana, but as soon as they opened the borders with Ghana, um, his grandfather actually sent him some money completely out of the blue. So suddenly he had money, and then he chose himself to go to Ghana. And so that was absolutely wonderful because somebody else making him go, he chose. And, I think it's still a battle. And now I work with more people coming out of cults. I have a lot of sympathy for that struggle. It's really, really, really difficult to come back
Mm,
to yourself, to face whatever the demon is that the person cannot face. And yeah, I think is one of the hardest struggles, probably just as hard a struggle as coming off. And I think it's a very, very, very hard struggle. Um, and even as I'm saying it
mm.
to you now, I would say that maybe a really good for anybody who's actually dealing with that kind of thing, like coming out of a gang, coming out of a cult, coming out of prison where you don't want to go back. I would probably really recommend it because that is so good at clearing the brain receptors that would lead you towards an addiction. Because I feel the that makes somebody want to be back in a gang or be back in a cult, which they're not walking around like, where is that cult I want to join? It's not like that. But it feels the same like an addiction that cannot be let go of. And so my intuition is Iboga would be very, very, very helpful as a first medicine when somebody really, really, I suppose it's
Breaking a
breaking a,
behavior. And
yeah. And Iboga is very, very good at literally returning. They say like when someone who's been using heroin for a long time takes Iboga, the brain receptors, the part that would be going wild for the heroin, literally goes back to being before they ever had that.
wow.
So yeah, yeah. And right now I'm just having the thought that Iboga actually would be a really good medicine for people struggling with that.
So for yourself as Akua before doing the research, the reading, and taking the different psychedelics, and now after you see a difference between the two people?
Yeah, night
Oh,
and day. Abs- It's funny, I see a difference, and then I also see a continuation. So, but I think definitely I see a massive difference because, well, I suppose the biggest difference is now I work pretty much full time serving medicine, working around the medicine. So that's the biggest difference. I see a difference because my gifts, my natural now have a place that now they really make sense. So a friend of mine did a testimonial for me. We did medicine together, and I asked her to do a testimonial. And then in it, she said how she had always seen me as a mother hen figure. And it made me laugh because she's always called me mother hen, mother hen. You're so motherly, mother hen, all the time, the years we've known each other. And if she has a problem, she used to call me and she'd be like, I really need my mother hen. Yeah, I thought it was interesting that she said that because now that part of my personality, it makes sense. The part that's good at advising people, the part that's good at knowing um, the way in which one should do something as a person, the advice part of me now really makes sense under the umbrella of serving medicine and helping people to do their integration. I see all my good traits. I see, this is I've had these traits. This it was for this job, it fit with me. And so the confidence I feel around the medicine and working with the medicine and working with it's
channels you
I
so well.
realize it's my person. Yes, yeah, yeah. So that's the big difference. Yeah,
It's interesting because I think I would completely agree, and I haven't known you before, but for me, your story, when I read about it, it completely was saying mother him, because it's really about a mother just like moving heaven and earth for the son. For me, that's what it was like, I know it was triggered by the concern for your son and all this happened. It's a personal story, but for me, it really was about being that mama there. And just about being a mom, are you openly share the story of your son and his struggles? Is he on board with that?
Now, more than ever, Africa is rising. See, across the continent, we are seeing scientific innovations, cultural talent, entrepreneurship, and this is a growing opportunity to shape our own future. At Raw, we believe Africa should be built by Africans, and that begins with sharing knowledge widely, without barriers.
Because of our colonial history, are really struggling to understand how we can tap into our roots, how we can, for instance, use our indigenous languages to build ourselves. A few weeks ago, I actually did an article around how Harvard University has actually built one of the biggest African languages system. And I think if you scroll through the Harvard website, you'll actually be able to see that it's Africans who have actually done this. If you go to the website, it actually says here, a serious understanding of Africa begins with language study. Indigenous African languages serve as roadmaps to understand how social, political, and economic institutions and processes develop, from kinship structures, the evolution of political offices and trade relations, to the transfer of environmental knowledge. So, if this is the case, and you can see even Harvard understands this importance, that's why they took the time, they took the resources to actually build an entire program within their Ivy League school around African language. Now, why is it that many of us Africans today struggle to embrace our African languages and use that in our education system, and to provide reading materials and and educate and also integrate those languages in our education system and build a whole curriculum around this? I think many of us have bought into this fallacy that almost the entire world is currently being run in English. And I saw this incredible article by ccjk.com, and they were actually looking at the statistics around English, how many people actually speak English. Now, some of the facts that I saw in this article is that in a world where we have approximately 7.8 billion people, only 4.9% of the people actually speak English, and this translates to 1,348 million.
So, see, because when knowledge is accessible to everyone, we build stronger communities, we spark local innovations, and we unlock the full potential of all African talent across all sectors. So whether you're a scientist, an artist, a cultural leader, now is the time to step up. Register and list your course today at resources.roar.academy and reach learners across Africa. Teach in the language your people understand. And this is how we build Africa. Together, we are building a community. Roar, where Africans learn from Africans, where Africa builds Africa.
And so before it cut off, I was talking about your mother instinct, and I'm just wondering, you speak very openly about your son and his story and his struggles. Is he on board about sharing his story so publicly?
He hates. Yeah, he hates it, and so my promise to him is to not talk about his life after that period. So I don't talk about his life after that period because that's his business. And so what I say to him is I talk about the part that was a big thing for me, and so everything else is his story. Maybe he will, maybe he won't, but yeah. So his story publicly finishes with he finished and he went to Ghana, and then after that he was himself. Um, and so I don't share any pictures of him above the age of 8 because I think there's pictures of him online from even his father's page. But yeah, so I've left him as much of his privacy as I possibly can, but I also want to honor my life and the story and the big change it's made in not just my life or not just his life. Because of his story, all my siblings have tried psychedelics. Um, and use it for different things. Because of this story, my life has completely changed, and I've managed to find what is mine to do in this incarnation. It's completely opened up my spirituality, and I continue to learn. And so it's a weird thing that this should have been in a way. So yeah, life is just weird. That's what I
Life
that's
is
what I
life.
can. Yes, life is life in indeed.
And so you built initiatives like the African Spiritual Practices and now run retreats in Ghana, Portugal, and the Canary Islands. And I think you've hinted on the importance of community for healing and how you found that. Why are these spaces and community important for healing?
Yeah. Oh, they're so important for healing. I mean, when I was first given the task of starting African spiritual practices events, um, I, I, at first I interpreted it as doing a podcast, and so I was doing a podcast for a while, and then the message came again, but this time it was like, no, they need face to face, body to body. And I was given a bit of information about what happens when human beings are in the same space with each other. Later, it was actually my brother gave me some more information about actually hormones jumping from one person to another person, and the things that he could see. And then that made sense why, when the mission was given, it was no, they must meet face. And since the last one, I come across people who have been to an African spiritual practices in the UK, and they talk about how life changing it was. Sort of, yes, the people doing all the talks, but actually the other conversations they had with other people, and hearing somebody else kind of say, I always knew I had another spiritual calling, but I just didn't know where to start. I just didn't know, how does one have an altar? I didn't know, should I go to Ifa, or should I find out what is the native spirituality in my land. And so people found community and find community with each other when they come to African spiritual practices. And I think community is the most important thing. Any way in which you can build community, find people who, they don't have to think alike, but are heading in the same direction. And you don't have to stay with them forever either. You know, you can learn what you need to learn and go off on another way. Personally, I'm I don't sign up to a unity that means everybody all board. That be kind of aligned for as long as it lasts, and then you carry on your way. You will meet the next community. We're not a monolith at all. So let's just learn from each other, flow when we can flow, separate when we need to separate, and come back together if that what's needed. But yeah, for me, African Spiritual Practices event was the first big mission I was shown, and
You've also worked with parents that are affected by gang grooming. What is the most powerful transformation that you witnessed with your work?
yeah. I think the biggest transformations are always in the parents. Those are the really, really, really big transformations, because it's the parents who are the ones who reach out to me and the ones I begin to work with. I don't work with other people's children because in the UK, using these medicines are illegal. And I think because of the way in which I came to it, I feel it's only, and not only, but when this is happening, you need to change to be able to deal with what is happening in your home. Me coming in and working with your child, that's not building your relationship. And so it's a hard, long road. Most of the parents that I work with, the biggest change is in a kind of acceptance sometimes. And yeah, and waiting for life to unfold. And what's been amazing is the young people who've changed, they've changed on their own. You know, their families have changed around them, and then they've changed. And the good thing is, because then the parents are not living in fear and are not living in worry, they can all move on the new road together. I would say one of the worst things about this thing of young people falling into drugs or criminality is the fear that's left in the family about the well-being of this person is really damaging, because it's very hard for the young person to move forward because the family are fear. oh my God, is this all right? Is that all right? And that's the hardest thing. But when the family are working with the medicines, when the young people change, they are able to go along with the change as well. And that's the part that's really amazing. But it's not easy work and it's not quick at all, unfortunately.
I can imagine it's not, because a lot of it really sounds counterintuitive. Like you're concerned, you're having questions, you're freaking out, and it's like I think that's why it's really important to have someone like you to support them. You've spoken at Oxford University, UCL, and Breaking Convention. What message do you want to share with the world about psychedelics and African spirituality?
Um, the biggest message is I think everybody deserves healing. And so I think, explore to find the healing that is good for you because you deserve it. Nobody deserves to be unhappy for a really long time. Um, don't be concerned about what other people may say. Oh, what does it look like if I'm now using ayahuasca or I'm now whatever? It's you that's living with whatever it is you're living with. So try 101 different things. I meet people and they say, I've tried everything. And I can always with confidence say, well, you haven't because it's not possible to try everything in a lifetime. So, yeah, I just say if you've got an issue and you've been on 23 different types of antidepressants, still try something else. It's not over until and then sometimes I think it's still not over because you can come back again and the issues follow. And if I can make an appeal for
Mm-hmm.
help, um, I would love to use your. I am I've partnered with a church, some pastors, to do some work with prisoners who are coming out of prison, to be able to serve them with ayahuasca. And so soon we're going to be asking really for help from people in Ghana or around Africa to help us to be able to roll out this project. And we're also going to be helping older orphans because in Ghana, not all orphans have lost both parents. You can take your child to an orphanage if you just find you just can't afford to look after them. So what happens at age 18 is the orphanage will normally give them a little bit of assistance and then they either go back to their family, or they go out into the world. So one of the projects that I'm looking to do is to actually work with these young people for the 3 months before they leave with ayahuasca, just to help them to let go of trauma, to open up their minds to what's possible in the world, to help them go into the world with something more than maybe the pain them there. So I'll send my details to you. And yeah, if there are people in Ghana, West Africa, who want to help in either one of these projects, then please get in touch
Mm.
with me. And
Where
yeah,
can they
I'm
find more
super looking.
information and reach you? Um,
So this week, I'm going to put that information on my website. And my website is AKUAO. Yeah, and that's my website.
Awesome. And I'll share Akua's contact information if you need to find out more about her works and the future events that she will be carrying out. Akua, thank you so much for joining us today. At the end of the episodes, we usually like to ask our guests to bid farewell to our listeners and people who are watching in their local language. And I believe yours is Tree. Would you do us the honor of saying bye to our viewers?
Okay, that's it. Oh, nti nyame nhyira mo. Nyame nhyira mo nyinaa. Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay.
If you enjoyed today's episode and are passionate about African excellence and transformative leadership, then you are in for more.
Be sure to check out this video here and our next episode where we dive deeper into African innovative solutions. Don't forget to subscribe and share this video with someone that finds value in these stories. And finally, we want to hear from you. Comment below a guest that you would like us to feature or a subject that you are curious about. Your ideas fuel our mission, and your voices matter in shaping the conversations that we bring to life. Stay curious, stay inspired, and I'll catch you here next time on The Roar.